get things started. I'm Jacob Miller. I'm the chair of the Planning and Development Committee. I want to take care of a few little housekeeping things before we pass it over to Columbus team and talk about the Columbus growth strategy. This is a little bit of a different format than our usual Planning and Development Committee, but the Clintonville Area Commissioners asked us to, basically make this a venue to discuss the Columbus growth strategy. We moved it up a week. We changed the day of the week a little bit. So, but I think that's a great use of this committee to, be a venue for these types of discussions that, maybe can't be had at every area commission meeting. So I'm really excited to have this discussion with you all. We are still putting together the slate for the 2026 Planning and Development Committee. So applications for that are due on Friday. And so I know I invited many of you that were interested in that committee, and some of you are here to attend. So that is great to kind of learn more about the plan and development. But then we will that slate will be approved on the next area commission meeting. So, and then we will have our new planning and development committee. So this is still under the, even though I'm the chair, I've already been appointed, we still are under the 2025 planning and development committee members. So just a little bit of a clarification there. And send me your applications if you are interested. Anything else? Any questions on that, Brittany?
Can you, maybe I'm reading the reminding notes, but just in case, can you share what is required for an application?
Yeah, sure.
How short and simple it is?
Sorry, Chair Bolton, I should say. I don't know if I have to say that when it's not here. I don't know. Still learning. First meeting.
It's your committee.
All I need is a simple bio, maybe one paragraph, and then a few sentences on why you'd like to be on the committee. Don't need a whole lot, a lot of detail, just some basic facts, and, kind of talking about your interest in the committee. And then we'll put the slate together. I think we'll have a pretty good, sizable committee this year. There's no limit on size or anything like that. So, for me, it's mostly more the merrier, and we appreciate everyone that is willing to give their time to this committee. It means a lot. So, and I know the commission appreciates it too. All right. I guess I'll go ahead and pass it off to the city of Columbus to talk about the Columbus growth strategy.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. I'm Mark Trevellis with Columbus Planning Division. It's Christopher Lord. He's the assistant administrator. I'm the administrator. We're part of the development department, and appreciate you having us tonight, and chair also, and for making this special arrangement. We really do appreciate it. And I think we've got about 20 slides that we're going to kind of share, and we'll talk through them relatively quickly. At any point, we wait to the end and have questions, or if you want to jump in, whatever works for you all, to the degree. We'll hopefully make this as conversational as possible. And as Jacob said, we're here to talk about the Columbus growth strategy. This is something we've been working on for some time now, and is coming to fruition. So we wanted to give you a brief overview and how it relates to the city zone in project, and how it relates to the Clintonville neighborhood plan, what's coming next. So I'll let Christopher start out with some background on zone in.
Great. So zone in, if you've been following it, it's been going for around 5 years now. This is the timeline. We had initially in the fall of 2021 the code assessment that told us really what we already knew, which is that the existing zoning code is broken. So from there we moved on into resolution of support for that first phase. That's what covered streets like High Street here in Clintonville. Ultimately, that was rezoned in the summer of 2024. So that really only covered 4.2% of the city. And but it covered the most important areas that all of our plans, all of our most recent plans, called for mixed-use development, saying that mixed-use development belongs, the most intense mixed-use development belongs on these primary corridors. So moving from then, this past summer, we had a support established by council for this next phase. And we're like, okay, 4.2% of the city still have 95% to go. And for this phase, we're calling it economic and housing opportunity. So we wanted to look at all of those industrial and warehouse type areas throughout the city. Those are big chunks of Columbus. We also wanted to look at those business and institutional campuses, things like Ohio State or Nationwide Hospital, as well as some of the older office complexes that really provide the lion's share of the revenue for the city through income tax, right? And then we also wanted to take another look at some of our secondary corridors, establish mixed-use recommendations for those areas that can ultimately lead to rezoning. So that's where we are right now, is coming into 2026. What we're looking to do is establish the Columbus Growth Strategy, which is the policy basis for those zoning districts, which we hope to adopt later this summer. So the zoning project goals, these were established way back, a few years back. So before we established the new zoning districts on places like High Street, we first had to say, okay, what are the broad goals of the zoning initiative, that rezoning effort? And so the parts that really apply to this phase are making sure we recognize and create new job centers, encourage thoughtful investments in the neighborhoods that have experienced, in particular, racial and economic segregation, and then helping to undo some of that harm caused by the past urban development policies. And the highlighted ones are really the key ones here, ensuring the Columbus Code is fair, understandable, and accessible. So again, covering what we covered in phase one, equitable access. 4.2% of the city. You can see the different zoning districts that were established at that time. We didn't need the policy basis because all of our plans were pointing in that direction for mixed-use development. Huge success. 2024, 140 miles of corridors that were established, over 12,000 parcels, 6 different districts. We got 8,000 responses on our surveys as part of that, as part of the community engagement around that. We increased the number of uses that were allowed, in particular housing on the first floor. All of our commercial districts, the C4, said you had to do commercial on the first floor before you could do residential. So that prevented a lot of the apartment complexes and overbuilding of commercial that we had seen in the past. Again, just 4.6 or so percent of the city. A lot to go. When we looked at the phase one map, how did we figure out where to go? All of these different plans, so including the University District Plan, the Clintonville Neighborhood Plan, Columbus Citywide Planning Policies, which was established in 2018, all of them were pointing to that mixed use on these corridors, and these were the best places to start. Not the only places, but the best places to start. We've never had a citywide land use plan in Columbus. Every major city, except for the 3 largest, have or are adopting now in the process have citywide land use plans. A lot of times it's part of a comprehensive plan that covers a lot of different elements, but they always have a citywide land use plan. The city of Columbus, because of that, has lacked comprehensive land use policy that guides city growth and supports broader citywide policies like zone in or investment of infrastructure, capital planning, budgeting. We had over 40 plans today. Some of them date back all the way to 1994. We have some that are more recent through Columbus Citywide Planning Policies, but they're all getting old. They're created at different times, and they're a snapshot, each and every one of them. So if you have land use policies from 1994 for one community, they're stuck with that until their new land use plan can be adopted. We tried to evolve that with Columbus Citywide Planning Policies, but we realized once the zone-in initiative got started that we really need citywide policy to guide it. So the goal here, a single citywide strategy that sets clear priorities for where and how Columbus grows, connecting housing, jobs, transportation, infrastructure so the city can grow with purpose in a coordinated way.
You're good. No, keep going.
So, enter the Columbus Growth Strategy, an amendment to Columbus Citywide Planning Policies, the core of which is established citywide already in 2018 by Council. As it evolves to become the Columbus Growth Strategy, what it will do is establish that citywide land use plan That's the biggest element of this amendment, and will be adopted in 2 phases that kind of align with the different zone-in elements. So we're not touching the neighborhood areas, the traditionally residential areas, until we start re-engaging about those areas at the end of the year, towards the end of this year. It provides the essential policy foundation needed to continue updating the zoning code and replacing the outdated and inconsistent elements of older plans. Some plans, fantastic. Glenville Neighborhood Plan still has a lot of things in it that we want to be able to reference, and we actually want to bring them into Columbus Growth Strategy where it's lacking it, right? It also establishes the policy basis that can guide capital planning, investment, and budgeting, as I mentioned previously. So there's select additions to C2P2 that made the Columbus Growth Strategy slightly different. It added in, for instance, industrial design guidelines, didn't have that previously. It also added additional principal statements that touched on some of the projects and programs that have been developed in the last 6 years. So again, about 90% of the Columbus Growth Strategy is the same as the existing Columbus citywide planning policies. The biggest difference is that idea of a citywide land use map that guides growth at a citywide level rather than at neighborhood levels. The proposed map, as we have it for the portions of the city that's covering, was informed by months of public engagement, resulting in thousands of different touch points and engagements. So this kind of slide might be a little bit confusing, but it kind of goes through how we started on this phase and how we developed collaboratively with neighborhood residents and area commissioners the different land use recommendations that we see today in the draft that's going to council. So we started in June, resolution of support from City Council that looked at just what areas are in play. We looked at existing land use, existing zoning, lots of different factors to say, let's take another look at these areas for this phase. Then we got to the 3-color map, we call it. Mixed use here, industrial warehouse here, business and institutional campuses here. And this is where we had significant public engagement to say, do we get it right? Does that make sense to you? And at what kind of intensity makes sense there?
Okay, so the blue goes up, no, the pretty blue. Yes, it corresponds to, it kind of, is that thing above it the whole city?
Right, so this is a zoom in, and we had a citywide look
Okay,
at which areas are in play for economic and housing opportunity phase.
and
What's the zoom in? What's the zoom in?
This is just an example area. So this
That's
is
not
Hilliard
Broad and
Rome.
High or
This is Hilliard Rome Road, just as an example.
if the circle. I'm like, it was roundabout.
of course, yeah, well, the Hilliard City Engineer loves roundabouts, but okay, so, so the blue is just an area, or is that saying industrial, or what is that saying?
Yeah, so this is saying it was kind of hitting the criteria that were established from that June launch that said these areas might be industrial warehouse, they might be office or institutional type uses, or they might be some of those secondary corridors that didn't get hit in the first phase of zone in. Okay. So places that we wanted to take another look for different levels of mixed use.
Okay.
I think this is a really great slide because I think because a lot of this is happening under the zone in banner, that this could be interpreted as a zoning change, but this is a land use plan. You can see at the top, talking about it's sort of the policy that sets the zoning that comes after this, 2026. You've been saying later in the summer. So I think that's a really important thing to distinguish at this stage, that we're talking about a land use plan, talking about the overarching policies before we get into an actual rezoning of any of the districts.
I mean, appreciate that. That's a really good point, and it's sort of the essence of this slide. Is like, how do you go from policy to zoning? And anybody that shows up for a planning and development committee meeting is at least you're in the room, and so you have a level of interest and so forth. But really, it's a difficult thing to get your head around, and the reason why I go back to what Christopher said, we had really 30 years of plans that said focused density and mixed use on corridors. That was sort of the easy part. The policy basis was there. None of our plans have the policy basis for the rest of the city, for the 96% remaining, which is why we said, let's use the Columbus Citywide Planning Policy, C2P2, as a means to update policy and provide the legal basis for the rest of Zone N. And when you get to a point where you have a citywide land use plan, which is what we're aiming for and we expect to have, it's no longer Columbus Citywide Planning Policies. At that point, it's a growth strategy. So there's a lot here. And when we engaged people, we made the conscientious decision to call it Zone N, to not be rebranding along the way, because we felt it was disingenuous in engaging people. At the end of the day, for this purpose, certainly the primary reason we're doing it now is to support Zone N. And when somebody's property is getting rezoned, that matters. And so we thought the most genuine way to engage people was to continue to talk about it in terms of Zone N. This is Zone N. And then every chance we had, we said, we're doing the policy basis for Zone N, and I talk about it and expand a little bit, thank you, Jacob, because I think it has what's tripped us up a little bit in our communication with some of the commissions. So, thank you. You keep going, Christopher.
Right. And so essentially what we're doing is we're trying to drill down more and more specific until ultimately we're at a point where we're engaging about what the actual zoning district and the specific regulations for a given site might be. And so that's really hard to do at the level of 40%, 45% of the city. And so again, starting at that, here's what's in play based on what we want to tackle in this particular phase, drilling it down, engaging on that, talking about it in more general terms. Is mixed use, does that make sense for this particular site? How intense?
And I can't read either here or there what's in the little bubble. Yes.
So project launch.
Okay.
So project launch, resolution of support, project launch, and then we're engaging on this public engagement
Which
from
is
that.
just on part of the light blue or the.
Yeah, well, in all of this, yeah. engaging
No,
on
I know,
this,
but
right.
but you've taken part of the blue
Mhm.
there and made it green.
Right.
Okay.
We're getting
Yes,
a
a little
level of
deeper.
detail,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
a lot of it's based on those existing conditions, existing zoning. And so we're jumping from there to saying, okay, based on our engagement, based on the conditions on the ground, this mixed use area, this isn't the same as this. So we're gonna say that's more intense maybe
Okay.
at that core. And then it gets less intense in these other areas. And some of the feedback isn't reflected on this map in part because it's gonna help us when we do the zoning.
Mhm.
So for instance, the industrial warehouse, that's just a staying industrial warehouse on the map. That's general enough for a land use recommendation. But we're getting feedback on the survey of people saying, yeah, that's heavy industrial. We think that makes sense there. Or that should be lighter industrial. That's kind of close to a neighborhood. So we're able to use that feedback, specific locations, to start informing as we think about the zoning districts that are coming this year. So public engagement led to that, and then further public engagement refine that, so that, actually this is not mixed use 3 anymore on the map, it's mixed use 2 and mixed use 1, based on some feedback from the area commission out there. So later, mixed use 2 is pretty general. Does that mean community activity center? Does it mean urban center? Those are specific districts that were created as part of phase 1, or is it something else? We're going to be making new districts that are accounting for all different kinds of places that we have. Is it heavy industrial? Is it light industrial? Is it what kind of business and institutional campus is it? Nationwide is different from Ohio State, is different from your local church, right? So we want to make sure we have the right districts down the road.
Remind me what all the abbreviations, the RAC and the UCR,
Yeah.
urban center resident, what are those?
Yeah, these are districts that were established in 2024
Right.
as part of phase one. So CAC is Community Activity Center, UCT is Urban Center, RAC is Regional Activity Center, UCR is Urban Core, and then we have some Urban General 1, Urban General 2 over
Okay,
here.
gotcha.
And
I forgot those.
yeah, and the CAC, RAC, those are more auto-oriented today, trying to evolve those into more walkable transit-supported places, whereas the UCT, UCR, those are already more urban character. So public input to date, online survey, over 3,000 responses. We had 4 different community workshops, pop-up events throughout the neighborhoods with over 2,000 interactions, stakeholder meetings with key partners and institutions, area commission engagement, over 100 presentations to different area commissions. We had a downtown open house, information station where you could RSVP and meet with the planner, kind of go through any questions you might have. We had our public comment period, of course, and then direct newsletters through Gov Delivery. You may have received those, different posts on Facebook and whatnot. Overall public input that we received was supportive, between 65 and 75% support. And part of that was, again, we're using the plans as a basis. We're not just like, this should be industrial. We're looking at what the plans say for those locations. It's not the only thing, but we're using that. We're collaborating back and forth, using a positive feedback loop with the community members to try and get recommendations that make sense for folks. So some of the key points here. So we're looking for a more flexible approach that focuses on design, how places look and feel, rather than strictly use-based approach. We want to encourage mixed use areas that are walkable, places with homes, shops, and jobs close together, so you don't have to drive to the things you need. We want to support more housing options in more areas of the city, especially those that are near jobs, transit, and amenities. And we want to provide guidance for when older employment areas or industrial areas might need to evolve towards mixed-use districts based on a community's needs. So, for instance, on the south side, there was an old rail spur long ago, 100 years ago, that went deep into the neighborhood, industrial zoning from 100 years ago. What we heard from the community was, let's start to think about how we can evolve that using mixed-use techniques, right? To say, this doesn't belong right next to someone's house anymore, or these heavier industrial at least. That kind of thing. Same with some of the older office complexes. The days of living here and driving all the way over here to an office job, they're changing. It might not be completely gone, but it's changing. And so what we're seeing is places like Grandview Yard, for instance, or what's the place that we did the tour?
Grandview Crossing.
Grandview Crossing.
Right.
So that's a newer mixed-use development where you're able to walk from your apartment or your townhome to your job and have different options for retail as well in that location. So here is the citywide view of the Columbus Land Use Plan, which is that citywide land use element of the growth strategy. This is what was released as part of the public review draft. Some of these have changed based on the feedback we received since then. But you can see significant amounts of industrial areas, and we kind of have those labeled where they're kind of unique, like airports or Columbus Water and Power facilities, or kind of industrial clusters.
That's blue light.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
this color here. And then 3 different shades of mixed use, and then some other business and institutional campus areas. So Ohio State, for instance, this is other office areas near Easton.
Yeah. Why don't I finish this up?
Sure.
Yeah. And let's switch seats because then I can reach over and clip for myself. So, I mean, thanks, Christopher. On that map, which is hard to see, was really just intent to show you a little clip. This is what it's online. But if you were able to zoom in, you'd see there's not a lot of Clintonville there. And that's for a lot of the rest of the slides. We're going to talk about the growth strategy sort of compared to or relative. What does it mean to the Clintonville plan? And what does, this phase of the growth strategy mean to Clintonville and moving forward to phase 3? So like with any of our area plans in the city, again, there's like 40 of them that go back to 1994. This land use map that was just on the screen will indeed supersede land use recommendations from any of our area plans. We have to do that. You can't have two different recommendations that both live together. That being said, the remainder of the plan remains. We made that conscientious decision. I wonder, should I plug in? My backpack is right there. I'll let you work on that, Christopher. But the remainder of the plan is there. And, depending on the plan, there could be mobility-related recommendations. I know we had trail recommendations we use as a basis for some UIRF investment. In Clintonville, there could be design recommendation, and that remains. So it's at its heart, it's the land use, the affected land use plan is what superseded. The remainder remains. As Christopher said, there's the primary corridors in Clintonville have been rezoned as part of phase 1. That's already happened, as you may know. In phase 2, the affected portions of Clintonville, we've done a little analysis, come to about 9%. So at this phase of the growth strategy, 9% of Clintonville's land use plan is affected. Of that 9%, about 6% of it is the deaf and blind school site, because it's a big site. And the reason why is because at this phase, we're addressing industrial and job centers and business and institutional campus. So that's a large institutional site. Mm-hmm. And the growth strategy is recommending it for business and institutional campus. So it's in effect a very similar classification that we're caring about. The large majority, 91%, will be addressed in phase 3. And indeed—
Hang on a second. Did you say the change of the school, the Columbus School for Deaf and Blind?
This is high school.
From a campus to a business industrial complex was the same?
Not industrial. Business and institutional
Okay,
campus.
a business is the same.
Business and institutional campus.
It includes institutional uses and business uses. It's sort of a campus environment is the concept that sort of ties them together. Campus, I think, is the key word.
I mean, there's a big bit of this wild.
It'll apply to the
It's
it'll apply to the whole parcel, whether it's been developed on or not. It's all owned by the same school, so it's all under the same parcel.
And the existing plan recommends it for institutional. It's in effect recognizing the use that's there.
You wouldn't see any changes to that site unless the property owner decided to bring a change. So there's I don't think they have any specific plans on that.
Right, which is indeed the case with any land use recommendation, but it certainly applies to them in particular. State-owned site, they're there, they stay.
I had a question about the different phases, because like you said, a lot of the parts that are important to Clintonville have already been rezoned as part of phase 1, the High Street, Indianola corridors. Mm-hmm. So, with this process, you're looking at a lot of those same sites as part of the Columbus growth strategy. From the results of this process, are those sites going to be revisited, their zoning, or are they just, they were decided in phase 1 and now they're set?
They are rezoned. They have been rezoned, so they will stay. What we're doing with the growth strategy is we're bringing in a land use recommendation that is consistent with the zoning that was put in place to sort of rectify, which is again entirely consistent with what the Clintonville neighborhood plan recommended in the first place. So But they will stay as they are, as they were recently rezoned, unless if somebody comes in and they want to request a rezoning, then they of course can do that. And I mentioned that the growth strategy, so I'm going to click through a few more slides, was very much informed by the Clintonville neighborhood plan, as well as area plans throughout the city. Although I will say, as I personally reread material in order to prepare for tonight, as we've looked at things, and I know Christopher's looked at this over time, there's very strong alignment between the two documents. So that's a point. Another point is, this is a new way of planning in Columbus. Your plan was adopted in 2009. The Westland plan was adopted in 1994. We have yet to get back to the 1994 Westland plan is still city policy that is used as a basis for review of rezonings and requests in that neighborhood. In the 2009 plan, which I would suggest here in Clintonville is still quite fresh and standing up pretty well, is still policy and would remain policy until it gets updated. And our argument as city planners is that the city needs more fresh and updated and regularly maintained land use planning in order to deal with the growth we're expecting. So that's an additional element to the growth strategy that we feel is a real advantageous over the way we've been planning for the last 3 decades or more, is regular opportunities for community engagement and update. So that's my last point here. So we're probably past the 20 minutes that I think I've said. You're good. All right, I'll keep going.
No, Christopher took 20 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. So
But I think it is worth saying there where you've, the next to last paragraph on that one where it says it was informed by the neighborhood plan.
Yes.
And focusing on density on corridors and then environmental protection and everything, because of course here in Clintonville, we're tree huggers.
And I'm going to talk about some of that more.
About us being tree huggers.
Quick look at the map. So this is the existing Clintonville neighborhood plan, land use plan. This is the Columbus growth strategy today is presented. So this is just reflecting what I was just saying. All the gray here is not in the current phase of the growth strategy. That's the 91%. So in the school, blue.
Okay.
So there's 6%, blue. The corridors were rezoned. 91% is coming up. Pay attention, we'll be in touch. That's coming up next.
Is that in the lower right, is that pink in the lower right of Indianola? Is that, I can't
Down
tell.
here, yes.
Yeah, so there are things affected there on Indianola.
There are here, I believe here, and here.
Does that have to do with the first floor residential or?
Yeah, so apartment districts and part of Indianola is C4 that wasn't picked up in phase 1. Anything that was apartment residential or commercial was looked at as potential for mixed use. So in the Clintonville plan, it recommends multifamily on that stretch of Indianola. For this, it's mixed use 1, which doesn't require commercial, doesn't require that mixing of uses, but the idea is more flexibility there.
Can you explain just as quickly as you can, succinctly as you can, just the differences between mixed use 1, 2, and 3? Because I think those are the majority of, the zoning, or not zoning district, sorry, the categories here for your land use plan.
Yeah, so mixed use 1 is the lowest classification. It's 24 units to the acre or 72 bedrooms per acre. Why are we doing that? We're changing the way we measure it so that we have, we're not biased towards single family development in that case. So the typical single family home is 3 bedrooms. Apartments generally have fewer, 1 or 2 bedrooms per unit. So we wanted to make sure that we were comparing apples to oranges and creating 2 opportunities. You could either be consistent with the units per acre, or you could be consistent with the bedrooms per acre model. So there's that. It's also a 3 or 4 story type of building would be supportable there. For mixed use 2, we're talking about 5 to 7 stories, 48 units to the acre, and again, there's a bedroom equivalent times 3. And then the mixed use 3, which we don't have any in Clintonville, but that would be 8 stories and above, and an unlimited density.
And I know at one point you talked something about being able to have residential on the first floor of mixed
That
use.
was a key element.
And in that pink part, we had one, when I was on the commission, we had one variance because, a single family home, they wanted to redo something and they found out that they weren't allowed to have residential on the first floor of their single family home, it was.
Commercial, it was
Yes,
commercial.
it was also, so that is something that we ran across and I can see how that would, be.
And we're still not talking about elevators in these 4 or 5 story buildings, right?
So 3 and 4 stories are typically not elevator, but they could be.
But the ADA says anything above 2 stories.
So the 3-story, so ADA, typically, you can have a 3-story walk-up, no elevator, but they would provide the ADA accessible units on the first floor.
And that's what we're gonna see in language?
That's required through the building code. It's not a zoning code element.
Because I was told that wasn't in the building code.
ADA is a federal law. That's how it's applied, is through the
I was
building
told
code.
the city doesn't enforce federal law.
Well, it's definitely not in the zoning code. It was just, we're not trying to dodge the matter. It's just the honest answer is that zoning doesn't impact that matter. It's
But if
something
the
that,
zoning calls for 4-story and 5-story buildings, it should require an elevator.
anything we would recommend absolutely will have to be compliant with federal law, 100%.
Well, and that would come at the permit process,
That would
right?
come at the permit.
After the zoning,
At the building permit
right?
phase.
When it'd have to pass, they'd have to make sure the plans pass all the codes and everything.
Absolutely.
I think you're dealing with part of the problem is your buildings people and your zoning people often disagree and their applicants get stuck between them. So I think that's some of the frustration we're hearing from folks. But you have a question, what could go, let's say the state wanted to sell the school for the deaf. What could a business it's purely private business, the developer can, what, in terms of residential, commercial, could they tear down all the trees and make it one giant office building?
If they were requests, what that comes down to is the zoning. If they were coming in with for example, even today, with an institutional recommendation, if they were doing something that was inconsistent with like an institutional school for the deaf, school for the blind, right? Then that would be a question about, okay, now they need to come to the commission, they need to talk through it. Same with business and institutional campus, which is just more of a catch-all to include some of those business type campuses as well. So if really we're talking about the zoning district, which we don't know yet.
Yeah, is it fair to say that the business and institutional, that's not a zoning district that's going to be in the final zoning code? It's just a grouping of those two things for the purposes of this plan. So in the future, do you see that that'll be 2 separate districts or 3, depending on the type of business or the type of institutional use?
There will be a few districts
Okay.
likely that will cover those different scenarios.
So just because
Those
it's
different types of places.
theoretically, if it's in that institutional district in the future, you couldn't come in there and build a Walmart because that's not an institutional use.
Right.
So I think that's part of the thing is like right now those two things are grouped together, but in the future it won't be in the zoning district.
Which you could build a JP Morgan Chase business campus.
Not necessarily because if depending on the districts, you guys haven't figured that out yet, but it could be a
My understanding is
institutional
that their districts
use.
they're simplifying their districts and having fewer, and thus making more things possible in like a mega district.
From a use standpoint, but not necessarily from a design standpoint. Generally, and Christopher can chime in, from a use standpoint, more flexible. From a design standpoint, more stringent. In general, the question is a teaser for what the phase we're getting ready to go into right now, because indeed this site will be the subject of the city rezoning action that we anticipate working towards this summer. And so part of our communication now is please continue to engage because these standards are being contemplated now and will be communicated out in the upcoming months. So at which point what about the trees? That's input. What about these uses are too flexible? Tell us. This design needs to be like X or Y. I could say in general, and Christopher's been engaging more with the zoning consultants than I have on the development of the zoning districts, but we raise points of sites need to be sure that they have connectivity with each other, that there's a level of design that they, we don't want to see what some of us would see as mistakes of the suburban past the isolated job center is the one that's vacant now. We want to see flexibility for users because there might be somebody they like, we would like to be able to do X or Y and we don't want them to get hung up on some minor zoning standard. But we want there to be quality design. A lot of times the quality design of this use versus this use, the community is like, I'm good in both cases. It's more about the design than the use. So these are broad brush input we're bringing to zoning code consultants and they're formulating these districts now.
How much of a lot by lot basis in the next phase is still under negotiable with input?
Can you expand upon that?
Like, if we say if we think 10 of those lots should not be what you said they are in this plan and they should be something different, is that something that we considered, or you need to modify whatever the rules are, the current guidelines are for that? We say, wait, that doesn't work. Here's why. Is that still under negotiation? Is that still negotiable?
Yeah. So we've thought through situations like that where it lives in policy that say you could do more on a given site, and then the code ends up being lower. So, for instance, if it's recommended mixed use 2 in the growth strategy and the land use plan, but in discussions and through our feedback, we're saying we're not comfortable just allowing that by right. We'd like it to be a mixed use 1, so say 4 stories by right, rather than 5 or 7 with bonus. That's something we want to hear, and then we can say if somebody does come in with a 7-story with the affordable housing and it looks great and everybody loves it, they're coming through the area commission to get that sign off. And we have the land use classification that supports that decision, right?
Well, I've been under the impression that this simplification or what have you, there would be fewer chances, fewer reasons for businesses to come to a commission. And right now, the Clintonville Area Commission has no input on design. Like for instance, the app. When they came to the commission, they showed us this beautiful sketch of brick buildings and everything, and you know what we got. And that, so we had we have no architectural board or anything. So you're saying that they will come, but will there be a reason for them to come to the commission? And I will also say down at Graceland, when they were building those apartments, the guy from Casto, looked straight at me, and I was chair at that point, and said, "Well, I really don't have to come to you." And that wasn't what I wanted to hear. So, so that is a concern. We're hearing, input and stuff, but if the zoning is done and they fit into what the city's saying, then there won't be any. How will we have any input?
Well, so I'll quote Christopher, and who has said, and I think it's a good way to say, is that what we're trying to do is make it easier to do the right thing. And I could say in phase 1, we implemented design standards that are more stringent than any commercial design standards that this city has ever seen. and we're entirely consistent with the design guidelines from the Clintonville Neighborhood Plan. We're talking about transparency and front doors and where parking is placed and landscaping. Frankly, we're going to be monitoring out the upcoming years how many variances are required. We don't want to make it excessively difficult for a small business owner to come in and do development on High Street in Clintonville. That being said, we felt the responsibility as planners, and we were proud that a code came into place to ensure that standards were going to be strong so that when you're walking up and down High Street, as we all are, that we're experiencing a positive environment. One of the most, I'm going to get to the next slides here in a little bit, but one of the key things that we heard in the Clintonville Neighborhood Plan, and Brittany was subject to hearing me talk about, and I think Stephen also, so I've been a resident for coming in on 25 years now. I was the planning manager when we did that plan. I'm really proud of it. I think I wrote at least half of it, and I'm like, this is a good plan. And so I say that not to sound like a blowhard, but walkability. It's out front in this plan. How do you create a walkable environment? You have well-designed storefronts, you have landscaping, you make the pedestrian experience a positive experience. We codified that. We no longer had it as a plan, we made a code. What that means for an institutional use might be a different thing, but positive, aesthetically appealing. And I will tell you, when we talk about the most important thing when we talk about the deaf and blind school site is plug in now, because what are your priorities for that site as we're designing the zoning? I think it should be restricted to no more uses than what are there today, period, forever. Tell us. I think that the natural elements of that site need to be preserved. Tell us, because we're crafting these zoning standards now, and 91% of the rest of the neighborhood is coming up in phase 3 beyond. So, please, remember that as a takeaway. But when we talk about the control of the commission, in effect, again, we're trying to make it easy to do the right thing. And we do anticipate people will want to rezone and they'll need a variance. And if that's the case, the authority of the commission stands as it would today. If they're able to do what they want to do within the existing zoning, then that's kind of America. You have that legal right. And we would want any one of you that have a legal right to do what's within your right on your property within the zoning code, then you can do that. So it doesn't answer all the question, because there are things that might require a variance today that will not require a variance tomorrow. But we think that there's good in that, while it might take some review from the neighborhood, and that's a downside. It's my neighborhood too. The upside is that the standards are so high that the quality should be baked in, and what we really hope for you all, and we hope for us, is that you're seeing good things that are being built. Nobody had to do anything. The property owner didn't. You didn't have to have a meeting over it. And we're like, look at that. That's what we're hoping for. It's not going to happen every time. It won't happen every time. We know that. It doesn't happen every time now. It won't happen every time later. But we're hoping it's going to happen a lot more. So that's me.
No, thank you. That helps a lot.
You're welcome. Good questions. So I'll try to blow through quickly. It's this versus this, these next slides. This uses this sort of, structure, if you will, of these development principles, and then their supporting guidelines and strategies. That's sort of the basic structure of the Clintonville Neighborhood Plan. The heart of it is the plan element. So that's Clintonville Neighborhood Plan. Growth strategy uses guiding principles and then principle statements. It's different language. They very much correlate with each other. What this chart does is we mapped out the 6 development principles, the heart of this plan, and then I went through, and we've done this. We've been doing this like crazy for years, but I did it myself in the last a couple weeks to kind of get ready is, okay, which one, does this have something that is represented in the growth strategy? And as I go through, I can tell you the summary, the answer is yes, across the board. Neighborhoods will have a vibrant mix of uses. For us, it's healthy and complete communities. That's where it's represented in the growth strategy. One example, I'm going to read a couple of these. I won't read all of them. Mixed-use buildings should be common on Clintonville's primary corridors, particularly at the intersection of arterial streets, blah, blah, blah. Columbus growth strategy. Mixed-use and highest density residential development should be focused along primary corridors and established commercial centers, blah, blah, blah. It's saying the same thing. We've gone through our plans and we mined them in order to inform the growth strategy. And, you know, and some of the 1994, I'll hear folks go, well, that plan's old. And I say, I'm 60, and there's elements of me that still have a little bit of quality. So just because it's 94 doesn't mean it's completely bad. We went through them all, we pick them out, we pick out the good and the bad, and we inform the growth strategy.
Before you go on, your next point there, I kind of disagree with those who are equivalent.
Which one?
Number two there. You say that guiding development principle number 2 on the left is equivalent to the number 1 on the right?
These statements are much more general. And that's why I gave the example, because the corollary exists much more in the policy than in the principle statements. So you understood, this is very broad. What I'm saying is that this topic of open space and environmental areas should be preserved is covered within this section of the growth strategy. So that's that. But here, ravines should be preserved, restored, and enhanced. Natural resources, including tree canopy, river, and wetlands, should be protected and preserved. So it's.
I'm a ravine person, and that's not equivalent.
Yeah. And where there's differences, and the Clintonville neighborhood plan still exists. So it only replaces components that are redundant, right, or inconsistent. Ravines, it's not there. These aren't inconsistent. We
This will still be
absolutely,
policy.
for Clintonville or any other community that has ravines, we would definitely be supportive of protecting those. I think that's covered under natural resources, but the biggest step would be mapping them. The Clintonville neighborhood plan, as I understand it, does not specifically map out the trees, for instance.
Oh.
It maps out the parks, it maps out some of those existing green spaces. But what we've done in more recent plans is actually map out that floodplain, the stream corridor protection areas.
Which is how the chicken place tore down all of the Bill Moose ravine trees. I think it wasn't that the one ravine where they?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we would want to map out those places that are protected by some level of existing protection from power and water, stream corridor protection, floodplain regulations, those kinds of things, as well as pointing out where trees exist. We have language in the growth strategy, and it's in lots of our plans about tree preservation. There's nothing in code today that protects trees. I know our friends in forestry are working hard to try to come up with a way to protect private trees. They have public trees. We know, about the Dunkin' Donuts, like public trees are protected and whatever, but private trees are not currently. So I think we want to set the stage with policy that says these things should be protected, and we negotiate on a site-by-site basis today. It's like, can you protect some of these trees? Can you work around them? How can we make that happen?
And my argument would be that right now, the Clintonville plan talks about ravines, but there's ravines that exist outside of Clintonville and Columbus. And we did this as part of the Clintonville plan because folks are like, hey, the ravines. But is there a reason why we shouldn't eventually amend a growth strategy, which we could open up for potential amendment? We don't know how often, if it'll be annual or every 2 or 3 years, but more than every 34 years. And the city say this should be a citywide priority on ravine protection, which then brings strength to the Clintonville recommendation that it's not just your plan, that it's citywide policy. It's a perfect example of how we're not trying to ditch that recommendation from the Clintonville plan. And as Christopher said, it'll remain as policy, but we're like, boy, these are things that we should be taking a look at, and should this be citywide policy? So generally correlation, other,
I
again,
want to be mindful, we have only 5 minutes
Okay.
left on the agenda, but I mean, if people want to stay and keep asking questions, I don't know if you're able to stay, that'd be great,
we
but
could,
want to make sure we get through everything you guys want to talk about.
you have the text there. It's not, the language is not always 100% the same, but globally, the topic areas that are in the 6 development principles that are in the Clintonville plan are represented in the growth strategy. In a case where we have room for improvement, the growth strategy will offer opportunity for updates and amendments over time to make it better. So that's really the point of those slides. And I think this is our last slide. Again, as we've been saying, this isn't the end of the conversation. So as it relates to the zoning action that we're getting ready to go into now, into this summer, in your case, for 9% of the neighborhood and 6% being the state site, please engage. Regular review, phase 3. Your 91% of your neighborhood is phase 3 of the zone in effort. And we expect to begin it this year. And we'll be in touch. And we talked about area commission role. There we are. Thanks, and particularly for listening to me, because I kind of get a little excited about this stuff. And so, excuse the extra enthusiasm. Happy to
We
chat more.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any questions? Go ahead.
So another idea that I didn't see mentioned here, do you give any kind of thought to neighborhood conservation districts?
We anticipate, we don't know, well, Councilmember Dorans is initiating, what comes to mind for me with that question, Councilmember Dorans is sponsoring legislation that will do some analysis and make recommendations as it relates to preservation. And so we need to do that analysis, and optimally we will align that effort with phase 3 of the growth strategy or a future amendment of the growth strategy in order to consider matters like that. Because with neighborhood conservation, I guess we would consider under the general umbrella of preservation, and that's where that conversation will occur. So it's on our radar, for sure.
But that sounds like that sounds more general. I mean, maybe we're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Like a neighborhood goes together and says, these are the qualities of our neighborhood we want to preserve. Single house on a large lot, tree cover, i.e. no apartments that are 3 stories tall, that type of thing. I mean, that kind of seems like direct conflict with what you're talking about.
I mean, that kind of conversation, I think, is fair game for phase 3 generally. When we're talking about planning for the remainder 91% of your, I mean, some of that's land use, some of that's design standards, and sometimes they meet in the middle, which happened with the existing Clintonville plan, and I think would be phase 3. So if you're looking at a neighborhood, we think that this neighborhood generally should be lower density, so 1 home on a lot, and that tree preservation is a priority. That's fair game in phase 3 of the growth strategy planning. It'll be a matter of just like establishing what your priorities are and telling us, and then I think that's conversation that we would anticipate.
But you're talking a strategy, not necessarily legislation, right?
What was the question?
You're talking strategy, like this is what we would plan for an area versus we want to have a mechanism to allow people to codify.
I mean, just like this, 2 phases. There was the planning phase and then there's the zoning phase. So right now we're in this industrial job center, institutional sites, in the planning phase, and then we're going to move into the zoning action here now. Phase 3 will work the same way. It'll be a planning phase, priorities, land use recommendations, and then there'll be a rezoning action to follow.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm pretty safe to bet that I'm the oldest person in the room, and that everything you described earlier about the walkable, and close to where you work and live, You're talking 100 years ago. That's the way it was. So what you want to do is go back to the future. What you've discovered is that the urban sprawl and as I believe it was Mayor Sensenbrenner, was it? That we were an egg and somebody hit the yolk and Columbus just went every which way. There was no rhyme or reason. But Mayor Sensenbrenner made sure that he had a big, he incorporated a lot. So you're going back to the future. You're implementing a lot of the things that were. And so I want you to be very careful when you look at, as Mark has worked very hard on the Clintonville plan. And if you look at Clintonville, we are an anomaly. We are an island. We are bounded by Upper Arlington, Worthington, an interstate, a river, and Ohio State, basically. You're sitting here where we have it all. We have density. We have, if not the densest, the second densest population or housing units in the metropolitan area. We have got it all. On my block alone, where I have lived now for 56 years, almost as long as Mark's been alive, we have commercial, we have apartments, we have 4 families, we have doubles, we have Airbnb. But just recently, with all these, what do they call it, AUDs or whatever, we now have one of those. Well, I want you to know that what you thought was really a good idea on those things, I'm looking out my dining room window going, that new garage with the apartment above it is bigger than the primary dwelling. And I find out that the person who is doing it has no intentions of using the garage as a garage.
I just want to, I want to make sure we get time for them to answer more questions.
It's just,
ADUs are not part of this process, but I know that was another process that happened recently.
It is in the text.
It'll be in the phase 3, I think, is when
Actually,
but it's already, I guess, it's already
they're legal now, right? We won't be talking about ADUs because they've been made legal in residential zoning districts throughout the city. So, there are elements of what you mentioned, Sandy. There are things that we'll want to talk about in phase 3, not ADUs. We don't anticipate, areas that are not necessarily walkable today becoming, immediately like new Clintonvilles. It's like, when we say walkable could mean a number of different things. There are a lot of the elements of Clintonville that I think are desirable that we think other neighborhoods really need to, benefit from over time. But some of the areas we'll communicate with folks that are like, we're suburban in nature, we're good with that. But they will represent, like, we do need to have safety enhancements for a neighborhood. We need to have a complete sidewalk network. We need to have a complete bicycle network. Not every neighborhood is going to be Clintonville overnight. We realize that, but there are improvements that need to be made to some neighborhoods, and there's elements of this neighborhood that need to be enhanced and reknit, if you will, or so forth. So, we're probably talking about similar stuff.
One of the things Councilmember Dorms mentioned was equitable. He wants to make everything equitable.
Yeah.
How exactly is the city going to do this equitable neighborhood?
Well, one thing that we see as equitable is, from a planning perspective, is that a community that has a plan that goes back to 1994 and we just haven't had a chance to work with them to get updated plan guidance should have the benefit of updated plan guidance. And we have found, and so creating a mechanism where there could be up-to-date plan guidance would create equity throughout the city. Most of the city now has some element of plan guidance in place, but it may not be up to date. Clintonville's design guidelines are quite strong from our perspective. Other neighborhoods don't have any design guidelines at all. So with a growth strategy adopted that has design guidelines that are adopted citywide, which are very much consistent with the Clintonville neighborhood plan design guidelines, that's creating equity from our perspective.
Other questions? No? All right. I'll let you have that here just a few minutes over. But,
Yeah, sorry, longer than 20 minutes. Thank you all.
Yeah, just a reminder.